Thank you for the organizers. Thank you for my parents who oversee the future of R and put at least 3 Rs in my name and bringing to this destiny. I'm going to talk about frustration to function, tackling the challenge of new tech adoption. These days, I'm an independent consultant. I use R for over 20 years now. These are some of the places I used it in Seattle, University of Washington, the Fred Hutch Cancer Center, some click industry, and more recently, pharma at all sizes. The outline of my talk is going to cover my journey with Quarto extension closeread, which I will also refer to as scrollytelling. I will introduce the tool and describe my first attempt, which unfortunately was not success. I failed. But then I came with a new motivation, a contest, encouraging people, users like me, to submit a project, which was a success. And I will share with you the lessons learned through that process. A disclaimer. This presentation is not necessarily about teaching you how to use the tool. However, I will try, my goal is to inspire you to be resilient. So I went to a conference just like this, and someone presented a cool extension, just like the previous speaker who did a great job. And it was closeread, which I'll demonstrate next. And basically what it is, vertical scrolling. You scroll down and things happen with the document, so you do not need to scroll to the sides and focus your attention. All you do is scroll down and things come to you. And this package, when introduced, had 2 examples, which I'll demonstrate next. This is the first one. You scroll down, you have 2 screens on the left and right, only one of them moving, and whoa, as you scroll down, all of a sudden there is a zoom in effect. That was the first example, which I think is concise and great. It demonstrates the tool in a minimum overload effort. Here's the second example. All the user is doing is scrolling down, and things happen. Whoa, an image, that's nice. You keep scrolling down, wow, it focuses automatically for the left, so your attention is focused. You do not need to think too much. You enjoy the experience. So this is the tool. So I had this wow effect, and I came home and I thought, great, I'm going to give it a try. So behind the scenes, this is how the extension is designed. It split the page into at least 2 parts. There are ways to make it even more. And you tag the objects in the other screen through your Quarto document using the tag. And these objects could be a text, it could be an image, and it could be a set of images when scroll one across the other give the effect of animation. They introduce a new terminology, which I will not get into, triggers, sections, stickies, but they're all about this, how to use this tag. And basically there are 3 simple steps. Setup, install Quarto, install the extension. Second one, run on desktop. And I simply copy-paste those examples from the repo. Execute Quarto. And the last step, publish it. And there are multiple places you could publish it. I used Git and Git pages. So you click Git push, GitHub page, and that should be it. 3 simple steps. I had no issue with the first and second step, but for some reason I failed with the third step. And that failing reason might not even be related to the previous steps, but with my bare minimum kind of like attempt to put these 3 steps together on my laptop and with GitHub, for some reason something was not configured. Right? So even though it should be a very simple analytic engineering process, at that moment when it failed and I tried to figure it out, in my mind, that's how it looked. So that was upsetting. And I tried to tackle it, but it was hard, right? I was seeking for help, but keep in mind, there was not much of community support yet, because this is a new tool. So Stack Overflow, forum, reaching out to the creator, reaching out to LLM was not much helpful to get these resources that usually we could easily find with more mature technology solution. So that was frustrating. So I just left it aside until, oh, so let's look from a product adoption perspective, right? So we have the innovators on the left side. So this is a great example of this Quarto closeread. And they want, ideally, for people to adopt the tool and make it more popular and community to emerge around it, right? So again, I left it aside. Because at that time there was only 2 examples and I maximized my resources. And then finally, one day, the creators of this package figure out the same problem, right? They wanted more adoption of this tool. So they declare about a contest. They're going to challenge people to submit their projects and create a community around it. So I was like, bring it on. I'm ready for this challenge. And not only a contest, they also have incentives, which are stickers. So who wouldn't be excited to get stickers as a prize? So I was kind of like, sign up. All I needed was an idea. So now I need to find something, a cool idea to write about. So I thought, okay, I have my ideas, which I usually write in my blog, drorberel.medium.com. Let's go to that blog. One of these blog posts I have, which from year 2018, called Meta Machine Learning Packages in R. These were the fun days of Carrot, MLR, Superlearner for machine learning. Only a year later, I had to rewrite a second blog called The Second Generation, which covered tidy models, MLR3, and TLVerse. And that's what was fun to me back then. And in these blogs, I even go down deeper to a classic paper from 2001 called The Statistical Models, the Two Cultures. Raise your hands if you recognize that paper. Cool, I have enough people to appreciate it. So back in 2001, people care less about Claude versus Gemini versus whoever. They even cared less about Python versus R. What they cared about was machine learning versus statistics, right? Machine learning was the new bad boy. And this is what discovered by Dror Berel, a Stanford professor, tried to dissect and tackle and to find similarities and dissimilarities. So everybody talked about this paper. That was the thing. And it's not an easy paper to read. And every now and then, every couple of years, I go back to that paper, especially in today's era, and try to read it again and get kind of like perspective. So that's another idea, right? It's always kind of like at the back of my mind. But back to today, now I have a new friend that that could help me figure out this paper, and that new friend is LLM, right? So I don't need to go to professors or experts in that domain. I could chat with LLM to explain me that paper. So I do have my burning questions, which they are kind of like, give me the gist of the paper. Sure, LLM will do that. I was always curious, why did Berel choose the term data modeling rather than the term that today is more familiar with, which is frequentist? And the third question is the Bayesian versus frequentist, right? So I'm curious, why did Berel omit Bayesians from that paper as a potentially third culture? These are my burning questions. So back to our Quarto and closeread focus. I had an idea by burning questions. I had the content actually to answer that paragraph by LLM. I also had visual aids. I asked LLM not just to give me a boring text, but to summarize it in a table, which could be easily done. But then I also wanted some special effects, and that's where scrollytelling coming to the story. So if you can make the analogy, the idea is the skeleton. I wanted some flesh around it, some skin to make it visual aids, and a fancy attire. But something is still missing, right? What would make the content even more approachable? I wish I could have some animation-like to dumb it down. And here's some example. Statistics for dummies, Bayesian probability for babies, or this YouTube statistician talk to biologists, which is classic to me. So how do I get that? So I go back to a Stack Overflow, and you could find really fun stuff at Stack Overflow. One of them is a fictional conversation written between a Bayesian, a frequentist, and a machine learner. And this is predated LLM, so this was written by a professional, a real person, not some crappy LLM. And when I was reading that first, it made sense to me because it made it more approachable. What professionals in each of these disciplines care about and how they share those ideas among each other. So I thought, how do I take this text and embed it in my blog? So with AI, I created fictional characters for each of those professions. And imagine what if all of them could meet in a bar and have a friendly conversation done with AI. And that's what it ends up. Here's a glimpse of this blog with the close read. So I begin my introducing. Again, all the user is scrolling down with the reference to the paper, and there are things going on the right side with pop-ups, give some very basic introduction for each of the fields, machine learning, Bayesian, summary, the table that I mentioned. More context if the user does not want to read it, that's fine. They keep scrolling down. Answers to the free burning questions. And then the second part, which is animation of these text dialogues. So there are 60 sentences, and as the user scrolls down, each time a character pops up and gives some amateurish perspective of animation. There are 60 lines, so I'll spare you that. And when you scroll all the way down, you get some self-content of the code that was used, which I will cover next. That was my project. So there are 60 sentences. All you have to do from the extension perspective is just to add in the red the @ and the CR and the name of the character, which linked to that image. But I'm too lazy. I'm not going to do copy-paste 60 times, right? So I thought, how can I do this loop it plus character for the random special effect programmatically? And that's what Quarto is for, to save us from doing copy-paste, so we could do things programmatically. That's the magic of Quarto. So the question is how to write a loop in Quarto document using meta-programming. So if you're familiar with Quarto and tabs, you could do those by hand, but you could also use a trick with the result as is. So you put the hashtag, for example, and the breaks, and ask Quarto not to render it with the HTML, but actually render the HTML as an HTML, and that's what the as is. So I was curious if I could use the same trick, but with different symbols, which is the @ for that specific. And surprisingly, it worked. I didn't even need to write the text because I used the vectorized solution. So that was adopting a solution I used in the past with kind of like a new use case. So let's break it down into smaller subtasks. First, combine each sentence from the text with the @read tag. So that's like a regex task. Print it in a long string, vectorization, and embed it in Quarto document via the result as is chunk option. That's it. Finally, here's some R code. On the right side, I have the different vector with the different variations of the effect. And these are the steps. I do the wrangling, not wrangling, I do the regex, I add the CR, and I add the TR, and finally print it with the result as is. With the text only and 6 lines of code. I do not need to copy paste all over. An epilogue, discussion if you'd like. So the tool adoption of close read, back to this curve of adoption, right? It was an innovative idea. It was announced to the world in a conference, and it invited early adopters like me, like people here in this room. It got some buzz in social media, but it still was somehow limited adoption, which correlated with slightly less documentation, examples, and community support. So the contest was designed to bring some more engagement via incentive and create a code base of examples and community, which in retrospective was success because after the contest, now there are 60 examples, I think, with extended use cases. Someone even wrote a meta-shiny editor to do that kind of like automatically. And there are also special visual effects and support of observable. That's really cool. My ultimate goal with me writing a blog, on the other hand, was kind of like to make something interesting, or at least not boring, simple, and approachable. So how to transform a complex technical topics into an accessible, engaging resource for a broader, less technical audience. I would argue or I would say some disruptive argument, many will disagree, that with LLM AI, expertise in a specific domain may not necessarily be a prerequisite for sharing valuable insights, for better or worse. Maybe asking the right question, along with employing effective storytelling, along with good enough LLM-generated content, could bring us to this goal of an insight accessible, simple deliverables. I don't know, days will tell. Or another way to look at it, back in the day, we used to pay 5 cents for a professional advice, right? But we could get a friendly advice for less, for only 2 cents. And who's going to provide that friendly advice? LLM. We count like in the beginning of this era, is this a safe place for us to go, specifically with this case study, technical, scientific paper? Days will tell. Some fun meta discussion, self-referential, recursive. I was using LLM tool for reflecting on one of its own creator, Leon Braidman, if you want to think about it. I was using meta-programming in Quarto, which kind of like was an invisible loop, to create code chunks programmatically, using dynamic generated code and content by treating code as data. This entire presentation is storytelling about how to do storytelling. Finally, tips, lessons learned on the way, which I hope I was demonstrating. Keep it simple, isolate, reduce cognitive overload. When we look at someone's software code, new extension, at the beginning it may look overwhelming, scary, and you might say, what? But then you break it down and you figure out, oh, I could do it. So start with a simple hello world, as I did. Break down the task into small, incremental, independent subtasks. Understand the various steps, but not only that, also understand the connective links, because sometimes it's the connective links that will break the analytic pipeline, your solution. Test in isolation, meaning each time isolate and modify just one part of the pipeline, test to see if it's still working, and only then move to the next. Beyond code, isolate possible confounders. In statistics, confounders are the variables that you know or may not know that cause that part of the story. And these confounders could be the operation system, Windows, Mac, Linux, the IDE you're using, the version of the package, the R or other dependencies, and the three dots, which kind of like you still don't know it, right? It's what you don't know that you don't know. Many times we fall into that trap. And give yourself a break. Reset, try again from a fresh, clean slate, and that's the resilient mindset that I was hoping to demonstrate and inspire you to use. No need to reinvent a complex solution. It's okay to adopt a working solution from another, even distant domain. My demonstrating of using the tabs and the other tag. And finally, community matters. And even if community has still not emerged, start it yourself. Thank you very much.